Charlie, you're a resident of California.
Well, the production of electricity, of course, is an enormous business, and it's not going away. And the thought that there might be something additional that we might do in that field is not at all inconceivable. It's a very fundamental business. Now, you are certainly right in that we have an unholy mess in California in terms of electricity. And again, it reflects, I would say, a fundamental flaw in the education system of the country, that as many smart people of all kinds, utility executives, governors, legislators, journalistic leaders, they had difficulty recognizing that the most important thing with a power system is to have a surplus of capacity. Is that a very difficult concept? You know, everybody understands that if you're building a bridge, you don't want a bridge that will handle exactly 20,000 pounds and no more. You want a bridge that will handle a lot more than the maximum likely load. And that margin of safety is just enormously important in bridge building. Well, a power system is a similar thing. Now, why do all these intelligent people, ignore the single most obvious and important factor and just screw it up to a fare thee well? So I'm giving you a response, which is, of course, another question. As my old professor used to say, let me know what your problem is, and I'll try and make it more difficult for you.
Well, to me, the interesting thing is that you had a system. I mean, Charlie's obviously right in that you've got about three goals in terms of, from a societal standpoint, you've got perhaps three goals in what you would like your electric utility business to be. One is you would like it to be reasonably efficiently operated. Secondly, since it does tend to have, in many situations, monopoly characteristics, you would want something that produced a fair return, but not a great return for capital, but enough to attract capital. And then third, you'd want this margin of safety, this ample supply. Now, when you've got a long lead time to creation of supply, which is the nature of putting on generation capacity, you have to have a system that rewards people for fulfilling that obligation to have extra capacity around. A regulated system does that. If you give people a return on the capital employed, if they keep a little too much capital employed so that they have this margin of safety on generation, and they get paid for it, they stay ahead of the curve. They always have 15 or 20% more generating capacity than needed. And one of the disadvantages of that regulation and the monopoly nature is that it doesn't have the spur to efficiency. They try to build it in various ways, but it's difficult to have a spur to great efficiency if somebody can get a return on any capital they spend. So utility regulators have always been worried about somebody just building any damn thing and getting whatever the state allowed return is. But I would say that the problems that would arise from, say, a little bit of sloppy management are nothing compared to the problems that arise from inadequate generation. So here you had in California, in my view as an outsider, you had a situation under regulation where the utilities had the incentive to have a little extra generating capacity because they got allowed to earn a decent return on it, a return that would attract capital. Then you had, I think, the forced sell-off of half of their generating capacity or something like that, and they sold it at multiples of book value to a bunch of people who are now just generators who are deregulated. They don't have an interest in having too much supply. They've got an interest in having too little supply. So you've totally changed the equation because the fellow that now has the deregulated asset for which he paid 3 times book now has to earn a return on a 3 times book what the fellow was formerly earning under the regulated environment at 1 times book. And so he is not going to build extra generating capacity. All that does is it brings down the price of electricity. He hopes things are tight. So you've created, in my view, a situation where the interests of the companies in the business have diverged in a significant way from the interests of society. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I really think that the old system was made more societal sense. Let people earn a good return, not a great return, but a return that attracts capital on an investment that has built into it the incentives to keep ahead of the game on capacity, because you can't fine-tune it that carefully, and you do have this long lead time. So, now what you do with the scrambled eggs now, is something. And with all the political forces back and forth, I think that you better have a system that encourages building extra capacity, because you don't know how much rainfall there will be in the Pacific Northwest, and therefore how much hydro will be available, and you don't know what natural gas prices will do, and therefore, whether it's advantageous for a gas-fired turbine to be operating. And the old system really strikes me as somewhat better than this semi-deregulated environment that we've more or less stumbled into. But Charlie, what do you think on that?
Of course, even the old system got in some troubles, in that since everybody had the NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard, everybody wanted any new power plant to be any place not near me. And if everybody feels that way, and if the political system means that the obstructionists are always going to rule, which is true in some places in terms of zoning and other matters, you get in deep trouble. If you let the unreasonable, self-centered people make all the decisions of that kind, you may well get so you just run out of power. That was a mistake. And we may make that mistake with oil refineries. We haven't had many new big oil refineries in the last period. So you may get to do this all over again.
All of that being said, there will be need for more generation capacity. I mean, the electric utility industry will grow. It will need lots of capital, and there should be ways to participate in that where we get reasonable returns on capital. We would not expect to get great returns on capital, but we would be happy to do that. We generate a lot of capital, and we would be comfortable in that business. We would not feel the risks were undue as long as we didn't go around paying incredible prices for somebody else's capacity and then have people get very upset at what that meant in terms of their electric rates. You can't go out and, if you've got a utility plant in this country that was put in place at X, and then you go out and encourage entrepreneurs to buy in at 3X, you cannot expect utility price or electricity prices to fall. And that was, in my view, a very basic mistake. I may not understand it fully. Area 2.